very much for that amazing introduction, Liz. Again, my name is Josh Davies. I am with an organization called the Center for Work Ethic Development. We're not as well known as some folks in the field like Burlington English, but we are partnering with organizations around the country and around the world who are helping people get employment. With the advent of WIOA and the introduction of some of the workforce education standards into adult education, we've seen more and more this emphasis around not just degree attainment, not just English language learning, but also this idea of how do we help people take those skills and get and gain meaningful employment. And that's really what we help people do around the country. We work with folks not just in adult education, but in those workforce environments, in secondary and post-secondary education. We work with community-based organizations around the world helping people get and keep employment. And with that in mind, we try and focus around research. We become a clearinghouse for data and information and studies from all over, trying to figure out what it is that we can do to better prepare the incoming workforce. With that in mind, one of the studies that we looked at was very interesting, was from a group called Express Employment. Express Employment, as you may know, is a staffing agency, but what's great about them is they hire people around the country for all types of different jobs. And because of that, they have a very broad base of hiring managers. The same group of hiring managers is asked once a year a simple question. When you are hiring somebody for a brand new role, what is the most important skill or attribute you look for when making that hiring decision? They did a study 4 years in a row, 2017, 16, 15, and 14. In each of those 4 years, what's interesting is the answers kind of come and go and change and go up and down depending on what's kind of the buzzword or what's most important during that year. With the exception of this, the number one most popular answer never changed. What was also interesting is the one that placed last every year, the least important factor, never changed. Now, I don't have all of them on the screen right here because you'd have way too many to choose from. But if you look here, you can see 6 of the ones that were every single year there. Attitude, education, specific skills, job experience, work ethic, and work history. One of those is what employers told us for 4 years in a row was the most important skill or attribute they were looking for. One of them, interestingly enough, was consistently the least important. Now, we can look at this, and we talk with employers all the time. Specific skills and work history, again, job experience, all those things are becoming less and less important. But they weren't the one that employers said was least important. Interestingly enough, for 4 years in a row, what employers have told us the least important skill or attribute they were looking for was education. Now, this isn't to say that education isn't important. It is. But what employers are telling us more consistently than anything else is that education is now just a price of entry. And what we have to do is focus on getting people those skills, but it's not going to differentiate them. What we have to do and focus instead on what are the most important skills. And for 4 years in a row, what employers have told us the most important skill is work ethic. Work ethic was seen as more important, than any other skill. What we found, though, is that while that may be important today, what we need to realize, is that we're also preparing people for the jobs of the future. 80% of the work that's going to be done in just 10 years hasn't even been invented yet. Entire careers we're going to look at are going to be totally wiped off. Right? What we're going to see is simply enough, entire industries going away. And so what we have to do instead is figure out what skills will be necessary in the future. And what futurists tell us in the future is going to be most important is work ethic. So what we need to do is figure out what work ethic means. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk more and more about what work ethic is, what it isn't, and what we can do with it. So let's start with question number 1. What do you even mean by the phrase work ethic, right? What is it that we're talking about? Well, for us, when you ask employers, they'll tell you it's a lot of things. It's not just who puts in the most hours, but it is arriving on time, ready to work, being willing to work with others, completing work in timely fashions, right? Doing all sorts of things. What our research has found is that the 7 most important skills for delivering work ethic are as follows. Having a positive attitude, making sure you have consistent attendance, professional appearance, the ambition to do more than just the minimum, the acceptance of other people and of the rules, appreciation of the people that you work with and for, and of course, the accountability to do what you say you're going to do every single day. Or as we tell people, they need to make sure that they bring their A game every day. With that in mind then, let's ask this question. Well, why do we have to teach work ethic, right? I mean, it's the kids these days that are a problem, right? You know, you look around and you see everybody there, these millennials, right? What's happening? The millennials, frankly, they're ruining everything, right? It's the me generation. They're lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents, right? Millennials are ruining marriage. They're ruining avocado toast. They're ruining everything, right? But at least that's what it would be if you read all the papers, right? The reality is, when you start to research some things, you find some reoccurring trends, some phraseologies, some things that consistently happen time over time, right? Like that they're privileged, they're narcissistic, they're entitled, they're spoiled. Well, it's true that this has been said about young people in the workplace. But what's funny is this quote actually comes from an article in Life magazine in 1968 that was talking about the dangers of baby boomers, then what we called hippies, coming into the workplace. Right? And you see the same patterns happening over and over again, right? We believe these printing narcissists have to document everything with their cutting-edge communications technology, right? You don't always have to take a picture of something, right? You don't have to post everything on social media. Well, what's funny, sure, technology changes, but this idea that kids are obsessed with technology doesn't. Now, this is from Newsweek in 1985. The difference was the technology at the time were the shoulder-mounted camcorders. Right? What's funny is when you look at it time and time again, what we have more than anything else, right, is very simply this idea that young people going into work don't know what they're doing. The reality is, more than anything else, this pattern is just about young people. It's not about generations. In fact, the Journal of Business and Psychology did a meta-study, a study of studies, where they looked at 77 different studies, and what they found is that there was no statistically significant difference in the work ethic scores of any one of the three main generations. In fact, what's very interesting, for those of you who are not up on generational studies, a lot of the folks actually in our adult ed programs are millennials, because the oldest millennials are now almost 40. The youngest ones are around 22, 23. So the youngest generation right now that's in the workplace, the 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, these are all part of a new generation they've dubbed Generation Z. What's interesting about Generation Z is now millennials are being asked their opinion about this youngest, newest generation. Not too surprisingly, when they were asked what was the one word that best to describe Generation Z, millennials said it was lazy. That's right. Already these patterns are repeating themselves. What we find over and over again is that the problem we have with work ethic in America is not generational. It's societal. We have people who use our curriculum that we partner with who are teaching middle school kids about work ethic, and we also have folks who are teaching seniors about the same things. The reality is what we have to focus on are the skills themselves, because it doesn't matter if you're 16 or you're 60. So let me ask you this question then. It's an important one. Can we teach adults work ethic? Well, we believe the answer is yes. But the problem is you can't teach adults work ethic the same way we do when you're a kid. When you're a kid, we point fingers at people. We tell them what not to do. We threaten them with punishment, and we help build these habits over time. As adults, when people point fingers at us and tell us what not to do, all that does is get us more and more angry. Yeah, we may temporarily do something while the boss is watching, but we're not going to change our attitudes. Instead, what we have to focus on is this idea of WIIFM. What's in it for me? When people better understand the concept of what's in it for me, why it matters to them, that's when people make a difference. That's when things start changing. That's when we find more than anything else that behaviors start to modify. And when we can integrate that, that's when great things happen. So let's ask the final question about Work Ethic 101. Honestly, why did we get here? Right? Why do we have to teach this stuff? When you look at the 7 A's of work ethic, right? Attitude, attendance, appearance, ambition, accountability, acceptance, and appreciation, those are common sense. The problem is that common sense is no longer common practice. Why? Because the 4 places we have traditionally developed these skills over time have been going away. right? When you think of it, for most of us, we probably developed a lot of our work ethic at home, right? Working with our parents and going through the hassles of the day and having to deal with work and chores and all the rest of the stuff. Okay, who are we kidding, by the way? No one's table ever looks this nice for dinner, right? Not even on Thanksgiving did mine. But regardless, this is a good example of parents sitting around talking to their kids, something that we're finding happens less and less. In fact, one of the things we looked at was how many hours per week a typical parent spends in meaningful dialogue with their children. That typical parent spends, get this, 15 minutes, not hours, 15 minutes a week in meaningful dialogue with their children. Less than 3 minutes a day. Unfortunately, we don't have any good data that proves any sort of causality from that. Now, anecdotally, this can't be good. But what we did have was the results of a study from the University of Minnesota. Cheers to all the Gophers who are out there right now. But the University of Minnesota tracked young people and analyzed 25 years. They tried to figure out what inputs early in life had the greatest outputs later in life. What they found, the biggest impact was not education, was not parents' income, it was not zip code, it was not race, it was not gender. It was doing regular chores. Interesting. Well, the problem with that is we've been looking at other studies related to chores in the household, and they're not pretty. This one was done by Braun Research in 2014, asking parents a simple question. Did you have to do regular chores when you were growing up? Well, not too surprisingly, 82% of parents said they did. These same parents then, where 82% of them said they had to do chores, were asked, do you make your children do chores? Only 28% said yes. That's a fundamental shift in a single generation. And yet, look at this, right? It was the best indicator of future interpersonal and professional success. So, if parents aren't giving chores, aren't doing this work, and aren't helping develop these skills at home, whose then responsibility does it become? Well, in America, the next step, unfortunately, falls to our educators, and specifically secondary education, right? Because right there is where we get a chance to prepare people for the realities of this world, regardless whether or not going on to college or going on to a career, right? Well, here's the problem. For those of you who have been out of secondary education for a while, unfortunately, the major focus for most schools today is testing, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, look at this. On average, a typical high school student will go through almost 100 standardized high-stakes tests before they graduate. Highlighted your sophomore year, where you have on average 10 and a half. What's crazier, it starts early, right? A typical preschooler will take 4 high-stakes tests in their preschool year. Wow. Well, that's a huge emphasis on testing. At the same time, we're dealing with this. And this is maybe a little complicated, but this is all 50 states in the United States. The last 7 years that we have data for, they're spending per pupil on secondary education. You can see most of the states are there in the red, and a lot of them have double-digit decreases. Unfortunately, for those of you in Oklahoma, you probably know this already, but you're leading the pack with losing almost 23%. Of the ones in blue down at the bottom, right, most of those are in the single digits with the exceptions of our good friends in North Dakota at a 27% increase. Now, before you think that there's only 8 kids in North Dakota, I will tell you right now, that is untrue. That's not why those numbers are going up. The reason why those numbers went up was the discovery of oil and gas in western North Dakota that significantly increased their state's revenue to help support those kinds of things. The reality is, regardless of where we are, most of us are dealing with fewer resources. With fewer resources and more emphasis on testing, some type of class has to give. What are we going to offer less and less in American high schools? Again, when you compare news reports versus study, you may find a different answer. The news will tell you it's arts, it's foreign languages. The reality is those classes, yeah, they're low and they've plateaued, but they're not going down. Only one type of class has seen a significant decline, and that is career and technical education, CTE. Those are the classes where we develop these skills in the first place, all right? Whether or not that was family and consumer science classes, shop, DECA, wherever it is, those are where we got the work-based learning skills to develop our work ethic. Well, okay, if it's not happening at home, it's not happening at school, where's the third place it happens? Well, for many of us, we honed those skills, further developed them by working a real job. Most of us, probably almost all of you out there, worked a job before you were 20. Some of you may have worked a job before you were 16, right? regardless of what it was, you learn lessons on those first jobs, right? Show up on time, get along with people you don't like, how to manage money, or maybe I need to get an education so I don't keep doing this job the rest of my life, right? Whatever it was, those early jobs help shape your career. The problem is fewer and fewer young people are working those jobs today. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which has been tracking employment of the 16 to 19-year-old young teen group, right, what does it find? Traditionally, they've had between 50 and 60% levels of employment. Well, that was true until 2001. In 2001, you can see there it starts to drop, exacerbated by the Great Recession in 2007 and 2008. Now we're looking at youth employment at around 33%. The scarier part is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that by 2024, that number will drop to about 25%. Less than 1 out of every 4 16 and 19-year-olds will be working. Wow. Now, summer employment is another place we've seen a dramatic shift. Right? It used to be in the late 70s that almost 75% of young Americans would have summer jobs. Today, that number has been plummeting, and it's less than 45%. So why are so many kids not working? What's the story here? Well, again, when you break through the noise and you look at what the data tells you, it's not that young people can't find work. In fact, there's an analysis of the data by Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. What they found is that the number of young teens not working, 16, 19-year-olds who aren't working, that blue line, nearly doubled to over 1.2 million from 1994 to 2014. But what you also notice is that red line. That red line is the number of young people looking for work who can't find it. You'll notice that line doesn't change and is very low. The reason why that blue line goes up is because of that yellowish-green line right below it. Those are the young people who don't want a job, and no one's making them. More often than not, parents are telling their students to work on their academics, to work on their sports, or get engaged in other volunteer work, which is all great, but it's not teaching them the values of work. And unfortunately, we're starting to see the impact now as more and more kids do not have any sort of work experience to develop those work ethic skills. If it's not happening at home, it's not happening at school, it's not happening at work, who teaches us about work ethic? Well, it's not through ads like this. The U.S. government stopped spending money on billboards like this in the 1920s and 30s. Instead, what do we find? Ads on TV that are almost, quite honestly, stigmatizing work. Right? You look at what's most popular. It's ads for things like pharmaceuticals that'll cure all your pain, injury lawyers that'll get you money for doing nothing. You ask young people, what's the job you want to do when you grow up? The number one job they list is being a YouTube star. Right? That's not work. Right? Top TV show on TV today, reality TV. You don't need skills to be a reality TV star. You just need drama. Nobody wants that at work. Right? I saw this sign the other day. I thought it was hilarious. I took a picture of it. Really, I think it sums up a lot of Americans' attitudes right now towards work, right? It's about giving 100% throughout the whole week, right? This is what we're seeing today. The reason why we have such a problem with work ethic is not because there's something wrong with this generation. Now, every generation's had a challenge. But what we're seeing is societally, the places that we've been building these skills over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years have been going away. And unfortunately, there's a significant impact there. One of the places that we see an impact right away about work ethic is right in our space, right? In education. And not too surprisingly, again, we get a lot of studies. We do a lot of kind of culling of research. Some of it is really earth-shattering. Some of it is not. This is one of those studies that it just proves it, though. Right? What does it prove? Students in the bottom quartile of work ethic have much lower graduation rates from high school and college than those in the top quartile. Again, this files in that sort of duh category. But part of the challenge is, more often than not, the reason why a lot of our students are in our classrooms is because they didn't have the work ethic to begin with. Because the skills that would have made them successful at work, unfortunately, didn't have it, wasn't helping them from an academic perspective. And it's really impacting us in the workplace as well. Why? Because we're in a really interesting place in America today in terms of employment. Right? We've got record low levels of unemployment, 3.5%. That is virtually full employment. We have 5.8 million job seekers across the United States, 5.8 million people looking for work. Now, that number is interesting because for over a year now, we've had more job openings than we have job seekers. There are currently 7 million open jobs. But part of the problem is, and you know this, right, we've got two populations that are huge. right? We've got people who are underskilled, and we've got people who are sitting on the sidelines because they've been told they don't have the skills necessary. Right? That's why the work that we do is so important, because there's a whole workforce out there waiting, right? This whole idea of labor force participation points it out so critically, right? The reality is we are at record lows. We're at 63.2%. That means two-thirds of our labor force is barely participating. One-third is sitting on the sidelines because they don't have the skills employers need. That's what we're doing, is helping them get those skills. But here's the scary part. When you ask them what skills that they need, when employers tell you overwhelmingly it's not about technology, it's not about technical skills, we need people with basic soft skills, right? What employers tell me all the time is this, right? We'll hire anyone from any one of the programs you work with if you can tell me that those people will show up on time every day and be there for the full shift, that they will listen and follow instructions, and that they can piss a clean drug test. We will hire anyone you send us, right? We'll teach them the skills necessary to do the job. We need them to come to us with soft skills because we're not prepared to develop those on our own. And unfortunately, the reality is that soft skills have now almost become a requirement as part of an interview process. 93% of hiring managers say that soft skills are as important, if not more important, than technical skills when making a hiring decision. That means 7% of hiring managers think that soft skills aren't important. Only 7% would hire somebody with good technical skills if they had no soft skills. Look, I'm not saying that those 7% of managers are dumb people. I'm not at all. But I am saying this: 7% of Americans also believe that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. I'm not saying it's the same 7. I'm just saying sometimes people can be misled. Right? Because the reality is, when you come down to think of it, when you make a bad hire, it's not because they typically lack the technical skills. It's because they lack soft skills. That's what 92% of hiring managers have said earlier this year. Forbes magazine did a study for a year and a half, studied 20,000 newly hired employees, found that after a year and a half, almost half of them had been fired. And the reason why they got fired? Overwhelmingly, it's not because they don't have the technical skills. It's because of the attitude. Right? We hire people because of their aptitude, but we fire them because of their attitude. All right? Think about this, right? If you've ever worked with somebody who's not very good at their job, right? And I'm pretty sure almost all of us have, right? We've had that person we work with who's just not good. But in America today, somebody who's not good at their job but shows up on time, gets along with everybody, their coworkers like them, right? And they're willing to pitch in and help out when asked. Think about this. How long can that poor performing person keep their job? Right? Until retirement. That's where we are. And this actually isn't a new phenomena. Harvard University did a study almost 100 years ago and found this, that 85% of your success in this world, in terms of your career, was about your soft skills and your people skills, how well you related to others. Even I ask educators this all the time, right? Is that what makes you effective at your job, what you learn in the classroom, or what you've learned in the real world? More often than not, it's people in the world and that life experience that's helped them be better. Now, you still need that 15% at the top, right? You still need those technical skills. But without the other 85%, you're not going to get anywhere. We know this ourselves, and we have to help our students develop these skills as well. It's not an either-or proposition. It's an and. When we can get people developing their academic skills, their technical skills, and their soft skills together, that's when we create students prepared for work and prepared for success. So let me start then, as we head into the back stretch of this webinar, talking to you about some strategies. What are some things that you can do to help develop these critical skills for your 21st century workforce, right? Because we know employers are demanding those skills today, and we know that come the future, employers are going to be working for work ethic as well, even if they're in jobs we haven't even thought of. So let's get into some of the keys that we believe in developing work ethic. Now, I don't care whether or not you're using a curriculum that we've developed, curriculum that someone else has developed, curriculum that you've developed. There are certain things that you can do every single day that will help develop these critical skills moving forward. So let's start with number 1. You have to be able to help people create awareness. Because here's the problem. If you ask the laziest person you know, and you can think we all have that lazy friend or that lazy family member, right? You ask the laziest person you know, how is your work ethic? What are they going to tell you? Oh, it's pretty good. I've got a pretty good work ethic, right? Now point out who doesn't, right? I'll tell you who doesn't, Josh. Every day when I'm sitting with him on the couch, like he won't even get up. Right? Never reminding himself that he's on the couch with Josh, right? The reality is we are terrible judges of our own work ethic. And part of that is there's a sense that somehow our self-worth is attached to it. Let me give you one example. This is a study that was involving 6,000 younger workers. Now, any millennials on the call or who are listening now, I want you to know, again, I've defended you time and time again during this session. It's not about you. This just happens to involve 6,000 millennial workers who were asked, do any of these words describe you at work? Are you people savvy, tech savvy, loyal to your employer, fun-loving, and hardworking? Well, interestingly enough, the number one answer they gave, 86% of these young workers described themselves as hardworking. 82% said they were loyal to their employer. 65% said they were people savvy. Only 14% said they were fun-loving. Right? Because when we think about younger workers in general, it's a loyal, nose to the grindstone, work till things get done, we'll celebrate later kind of group, right? Well, these same 6,000 millennials bosses were asked to rate those same 6,000 millennial workers. Their responses were slightly different. Right? Hardworking went from 86% to 11%. What I love, loyal to their employer went from 82 to 1%. On the plus side, they're far more tech savvy than they might give on, right? At least that's the perception. Right? The reality is this. We are terrible judges of our own work ethic, and it doesn't matter how old we are all terrible. Why? Because when we look in the mirror, we have a very different impression than what other people see. Why? As often said, we judge our own work ethic based on our intentions, and other people judge our work ethic based on our actions. No one intends to have bad work ethic. But what ends up happening, something else gets in the way, something else is a priority, this is that, and what other people see is something different. What we have to realize is that there's sometimes a schism, there's a disconnect between those two things, and we have to help realize that. But what also we need to remember is that work ethic has an emotional baggage that gets attached to it as well. No one wants to think they have bad work ethic. So what we have to do is we have to help ourselves and other people realize that these are work ethic skills, just like everything else. Think of them on a range of like 0 to 100, right? Where 0 is absolutely nothing and 100% is you do them 100% of the time, all the time. Right? If you've got a score of 70% in attendance, that's really good. But would it be better if we got to 80? Yeah. We can keep improving all of these skills. And we have to keep that in mind, that it's not an either or. It's not that you either have work ethic or you don't. Either you have attitude or you don't. These are skills. And we need to develop them just like we develop all the rest of our other skills. I like to quote American poetry. I'm a big fan of American poetry. So in that vein, as it talks about creating awareness around work ethic, I like to quote American poet, one of my favorites, a gentleman by the name of Ice Cube. And he says this about creating awareness. He says, quote, "You had better checkity-check yourself before you wreckity-wreck yourself." Truer words have not been spoken. Thank you very much, Mr. Cube. All right, so the first thing we have to do, right, is to create awareness and help people realize that these are skills that can be developed, not switches that are turned on and off. The second thing that we need to do in creating this, developing these skills, is to allow for discovery. We've already told other people, right, that they don't have, they don't want fingers pointed at them. They don't want to tell them what not to do. So instead, what we have to do is allow people to discover them on their own. Why? Because people don't argue with their own data. When somebody finds a fact and they uncover it for themselves, they fight to defend it. If you try and push that same fact on them, they'll fight and push back. Let me give you a perfect example of this. I live now in Denver, Colorado. I've been here for a while. I get a chance to travel around right now, but that was not always the case. As a young child, I grew up in the thriving metropolis of Lincoln, Nebraska. My parents didn't have a ton of money, so for our vacations, typically what we would do, almost every summer, we would go camping in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I remember it vividly. We did not go to the beach. We did not go to Disneyland. We went to the Black Hills. Beautiful, loved it. Now, one summer was different, and I vividly remember this summer. It was 1986. 1986, my parents told us we are not going to go to the Black Hills that year. We were going to do something completely different, and my brother and I were so excited. And then my parents told us instead of going to the Black Hills, we were going to go down to our cousin's house in Wichita for our summer vacation. Well, we weren't super excited at the time, but then when we got there, we realized it was really pretty cool. Amongst other things, my cousin had two things at the time which were phenomenal. Number one, they had an underground, in the ground swimming pool. Like not one of those blue ones, you have to climb the ladder to get in. It was like a legitimate swimming pool. Second of all, and remember, this is 1986, they had HBO. It was like nirvana. So we swam all the time. We watched movies. I remember it, on the Friday night we were there, HBO was doing the special, and we watched Jaws 1, Jaws 2, Jaws 3, and Jaws 4 back to back to back to back all night long. And then, of course, we're all hyped up on, like, Mountain Dew and candy. And so my cousin says, you know what we should do now? Let's go swim. That was probably not the best idea he ever had. If you ever remember swimming in a pool at night, you get these weird shadows and the lights and everything, and it creeped me out. And to this day, I will tell you this, I had nightmares forever that night, and I hate sharks, okay? Sharks scare the bejesus out of me. I don't like them. I don't think about them. Shark Week is not fun for me, okay? When I go to the ocean now, I don't get any deeper than my knees. Sharks scare the bejesus out of me. That's just what I learned growing up. So, for those of you who haven't been paying attention, there have been an awful lot of shark attacks this year. And so I started to do some research around shark attacks and see how many people died from sharks. And here's what's interesting. The last year they have worldwide data for, 2015. Do you know how many people worldwide, how many billions of us died from being attacked by sharks? It was 8. 8 total people worldwide. You know what killed more people that year? Selfies. That's right. In 2015, 28 people died taking selfies, almost a 4-to-1 shark-to-selfie death ratio. And the scarier part is this, those numbers just continue to go up, 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 and up. Almost 100 people a year today die taking selfies. It got so bad in India, they launched an entire anti-selfie campaign with all the places you shouldn't take selfies. And I started thinking, I was laughing at this sign about all these different things, because basically what made me want to do was do all these things just to kind of see, well, maybe not jumping out in front of the train, but the rest of them. And then I started to think about my phone myself, and I realized the reason why maybe selfies are so annoying to me, the phone in general, I had an experience, I remember, a few years back, I was in Washington, D.C., and walking down the street, trying to get from my hotel to a convention center. I'm there, I'm typing on my phone, and then all of a sudden, my phone, I had a serious message. I had to move from one thumb, so I stopped to like two thumb it. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, right? But to get serious, you have to stop, totally focus, and use both thumbs to type out your message. So I'm doing that, and I didn't realize where I was, and I had stopped, and no more than 2 or 3 seconds after I stopped, a Metro bus flashes in front of my face. If I hadn't stopped to type that message, that bus would have probably taken me out. And I know that to this day, I am so cognizant of my phone and where it is, because the reality is probably taking a selfie with a tiger won't kill me. A shark in the ocean most definitely is not going to kill me. But being distracted while I'm on my phone, while I'm walking or driving, really could. So because I discovered that on my own with my own Metrobus experience, it shaped my attitude. It's transformed what I do, not because someone else told me to, not because there were these signs, but because I discovered it on my own. When we let our students discover things on their own, that's when behaviors start to change. The next thing we need to remember in putting these things together is that we can't simply rely on posters. It's so easy because a lot of this stuff is common sense, right? So we're always like, oh, we don't have to talk about this. It's just a common sense thing, so we'll put up a sign about it. Right? One of my perfect examples of these signs, I don't know if any of you are from Texas, but there's a fantastic company down in Texas. It's a Fortune 50 company, revolutionized the way that energy is bought and sold. Totally amazing, cutting edge, amazing firm. What was awesome about this company is that they had 4 core values. Number 1 core value was integrity. And now, for those of you who aren't recovering HR professionals like I am, here's what I'll tell you. There's nobody in this world that loves posters more than HR people in the corporate world. We'll put posters up everywhere. Motivational posters, safety posters, employment law posters. We'll put posters up everywhere. So mission and vision and value posters we will definitely put up everywhere. This company did the same. They put the same mission and vision and values on coffee mugs, on glass cubes. In fact, in the lobby of the company, there's a 3-story atrium, and it was a 2-story banner. And what was this banner? It had the 4 core values of the company. In fact, in 2001, when the FBI came in to raid Enron's world headquarters, they found that banner with integrity as the number 1 core value. Right? They can put the value up everywhere they want to it doesn't change anything, right? Posters don't change behaviors. We think that they don't have to because if we put them up enough, people will just, through some sort of osmosis learn what's on them, but it doesn't work. Right? You go to any public restroom in America, there's a sign in there that says employees must wash hands. Here's what I'm going to ask you. Do you think any employee went to the bathroom and was like, I knew there was something I forgot to do before I left. I wonder what it was? No, the people who aren't washing their hands don't need a sign to remind them. They're just rude and, frankly, unsafe in the food handling world. Right? The reality is people put up signs because they don't want to have difficult conversations. Right? If any of you are in a place where you have a shared refrigerator, right, you know you've got that sign that says, please don't eat food that isn't yours. It's not like the person stealing food doesn't already know that, right? They're just a jerk. Posters don't change behaviors. They can help reinforce them, but they're not going to have those difficult conversations. We have to have those difficult conversations. I talk about this thing with the shared fridge all the time, and somebody sent me this e-card the other day I thought was awesome. A strange new trend at the office, people putting names on food in the company fridge. Today I ate a tuna sandwich named Kevin. I just chuckle every time I see that one. All right, let's move on. That's the next thing we need to do. We need to focus on what we call the 1% approach. What's the 1% approach? The 1% approach for us is this, is that the smaller a task is, the more likely you are to do it. For instance, I'm a runner, so I run a lot. I do a lot of different running. I've had the honor of getting a chance to run 2 marathons in my life. It's an amazing experience. Right? It is 26.2 agonizing miles where you are pushing your body to the limit. I had the pleasure of being able to run in the Boston Marathon on the hottest year that ever on record. Right? So you're dying, you're sweating, you're going up Heartbreak Hill. It's all these things. Your body is crushing, and you're pain, and it's awful. And again, it's 26.2 miles. And people ask me, well, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, you should do it too. It's a life-changing experience. Nobody wants to run a marathon. But what they will do is maybe a little 1-mile run, right? A jog. They maybe work themselves up to a 5K. Why? Because those things seem doable. A marathon seems impossible. That's human behavior. The bigger the gap between where we are and what the future state is, the bigger that gap is, the less likely we are to even get started. What we want to focus on is trying to help people create small incremental change. Could you be 1% better tomorrow than you are today? If people can just focus on those small changes, really powerful things can happen. Here's the crazy part about it. And this is what I learned. It was one of those. I thought it was a trick question, right? Somebody asked me, if you are 1% better every day for 40 days, how much better are you? Well, you would think maybe just 1%. Now, those of you who are, applied math teachers, you know better than that, right? Because you use compound interest. And what do you find? If you are 1% better every single day, you're actually 120% better at the end of 40 days. Because that compound interest keeps building and building and building and building. And frankly, sometimes even a 1% change can make a big difference. I talked a little about math teachers. Now let's go on to that on the English side here, right? Let's say you've got a normal person, right? 3 basic habits. They love to cook, they love their kids, they love animals. What's a 1% change in a sentence? Yeah, you remove the commas. And now what happens? This person loves to cook their own children and their animals, right? The difference is you go from a normal adjusted person to probably 25 years in prison. Right? It's a big difference with just a little change. We talk about small incremental change because that's where we believe the magic happens. Next, you've got to be explicit. You've got to be explicit about what you want. So let's do this. What I want you all to do there as you're watching this webinar, I want you to think about 2 words, definitely and maybe. I want you to think about the percentage of time other people, not you, but other people will follow through on a task if they say one of those 2 words. For instance, I will definitely have that homework to you by Friday. Or I will maybe have that homework to you by Friday. Now what's interesting is as you think about this, the percentage of time that other people will do this. For some of you, and I know there are those in the room, if somebody says definitely to you, you're right now thinking they will definitely get it done. They've made this extra effort. They're going to do it. I am 100% sure they're going to do it. And there are some of you listening on this webinar right now that are like, definitely to me means no, they're definitely not going to do it, right? Maybe it's a 50-50 shot at best. Maybe. For some of you, maybe means, hey, it's a flip of a coin. It's a 50% chance. Some of you are like, maybe already means no. They just don't want to tell you no. right? We use these words all the time, and we think other people have the same exact meaning. Here's I challenge each and every one of you out there listening on this call today. Ask the people you work with, ask your friends, ask your family what percentages they would have for those two words, how often they think other people would follow through. And I think what you're going to find is that even the people closest to you have very different opinions than you do. With that in mind, what we have to do is make sure that as we're defining what work ethic is, what these skills are, that we just can't be vague about it. So often I think that's the biggest problem as we talk about soft skills. They're nebulous. They're seen as not important. Part of that is that we don't do a concrete job of explaining what that is about. Right? We'll just tell people, I need you to have a better attitude, but we don't clearly define what that means. So they're like, well, I thought I had a good attitude. What are you talking about? So we clearly define each one of our 7 workplace skills. For instance, attitude is staying positive in every situation. Take control of the way you react. What we want people to be able to do is know this. You show and you demonstrate that you've got strong attitude when you don't let a bad moment turn into a bad day. Right? If you're still letting the traffic that you had to deal with before you got into work destroy you, then you are not taking control of your emotions. You are not taking control of the way you react. You are letting your situation, your emotions control you. Right? At the end of the day, these skills need to be just like every other skill. They need to be observable, measurable, and then they can be coachable with our students. What we have to do is figure out a way that we can take the vague and esoteric and make it concrete. We need to be as explicit as possible, because if not, people have their own definitions, just like definitely and maybe. What we need to do is make sure everyone knows exactly what we're talking about, exactly how they can demonstrate it, so we can measure it, and so we can help them improve. The last step that I want to talk to you today is about helping your folks, your students, get uncomfortable. What do I mean by that? The reality is that most of what about what we're talking about here is not something that's different. It's not something that's that hard, but it's forcing people to be uncomfortable. And that's, at the end of the day, what we find is one of the biggest problems, is that people don't want to get uncomfortable. And so what do? They stop. They don't even try and move any further. And this causes them to not be able to develop their skills. So what do we tell? They have to get comfortable getting uncomfortable. What does that mean? Hey, look, we're talking about attendance. That may mean you have to go to bed earlier than you're used to. You may not be able to stay up till 2 o'clock playing Overwatch, right? That's just the reality. You're going to have to sometimes maybe wear a uniform at work that you don't think looks cool. You're going to have to deal with people you don't like. You're going to have to sometimes take orders from a boss you think is stupid. You know what? You're going to have to get comfortable doing those things, because in that discomfort comes growth. And that's what people need to remember, that discomfort is where the skill development will happen. If people just stay in their comfort zone, they're never going to develop this work ethic. They're never going to change those behaviors. We know this. Employers tell us today that these work ethic skills are the most important skills. Right? They're more important than attitude, education, specific experience, even job experience. We know in the future, an uncertain, a crazy unknown future, that work ethic is going to be one of the top 10 skills of the future. What we have to do is help people get prepared for that future. If you want to use some of our resources, we've got lots of things that you can use, whether or not those are free work ethic tips. You can learn about our research. You can get our definitions. Take stuff from us. If you want to learn more about our curriculum, you can do that too, but they're all at workethic.org. Take advantage, because there's so many tools out there, and our students need this. Adult education is the key to helping people not just get jobs, but get life and family and career-changing and community-changing careers. The work that you're doing is so important. And when we can combine the academic knowledge with the technical knowledge with this work ethic skill knowledge, that's when we truly set people up for success. As you think about what you want to do in 2020, as you think about moving ahead to the spring semester, as you think about where we're going and what we're doing, know this: work ethic is a critical skill, and it can be developed. But we need to be as intentional about it as we are about anything else. So again, my name is Josh Davies. I'm the CEO here at the Center for Work Ethic Development. You can find out more about us at workethic.org. If you want to shoot me an email, my email is there, jdavies@workethic.org. If you're more than one of those like social media folks, you can tweet me at ResultsDriver. At this point, Liz, I want to shift it back over to you and see if there's any questions and just kind of open it up from here and see where we are.
Great. So thank you so much. So what a great presentation. I found myself just being so interested and laughing a lot too, which is great. I'm not sure that there are questions. We've just been having a lot of chat and comments though over in the chat box and really.
I've been seeing little orange things flicker on my screen, Liz, but I didn't want to get too distracted reading what was going on over there. So I hope it was all related to the topic. That's all.
Yes, definitely. We were, discussing the concrete strategies you were bringing up, such as, being explicit and a few others that you had mentioned.
Awesome. Any other questions that people think about now or want to ask while I'm here?
Yep. So mostly they're asking when the slides will be available, which I've been fielding. By tomorrow, we'll have those up on coabe.org under resources. If you're not a COABE member, you'll have to join COABE to have access to the webinars. But that really, I think, is the only question people were wanting to know.
Well, great. I'm glad. Again, that's great data for us to share and to, if you've got folks, whether those are administrators, whether those are business partners, whether or not those are students who are questioning some of this stuff, these statistics can be great for you to be able to have that conversation and really hammer home how valuable these skills are, not as an either or, but again, it's that and to go with the rest of the stuff that we're developing and teaching.
Yes, definitely. Actually, someone does have a question. Do you have a soft skill rubric that can be used with students?
So we don't have a set rubric that we use. What we've done in the past, we have helped other organizations who have developed their own integrate our 7 A's into their rubrics. We do have one that we do share that someone developed. It's for students who are doing a work study or a work-based learning or some sort of apprenticeship program where employers then, as part of that, at the end of every week, evaluate each one of their students on each of the 7 A's, and there's a four-point rubric that they use, so they're all speaking the same language, and at the end of every week, each employee knows then how well they're doing, each student employee knows how well they're doing against each of the 7 A's that week based on feedback from their employer.
Great. And then we had one other question pop up. What would you recommend for motivating to take the first step?
I think it all boils down to this idea again of WIIFM, like what's in it for me? Why should they care? If you start asking, what's important to you? What do you want to try and accomplish? Where do you want to go? What do you want for your kids? What do you want for yourself? What's next for you? And ask questions to help them uncover that why statement. Because once people get that sense of why it's important to them to develop this stuff, why it's important for them to learn these skills and to demonstrate them, then that's when they'll start to keep that flywheel going for you. But if you want to talk about how do we help that motivation, that's got to be the first step, is getting them to answer that why question.
Great. And then, okay, now people are coming up with a couple more. We have time for maybe one more question.
We've broken the dam. We've broken the dam.
We did. No, I'm glad. This is great. Along with the 7 steps to developing work ethic, would you happen to have suggestions for how to go about each of the 7 steps, or is there a handout or something like that available?
Without too much shameless plugging, what I will tell you is there's 2 things that can help you. Number one, as I talked about on our website, you can sign up for weekly work ethic tips. And once a week on every Monday, we'll have work ethic tips delivered to your email inbox that you can print out. You can use it as an in-class resource. There's some different things there, totally free, some great things for you to use. We also have developed a whole curricula around Bring Your A Game to Work. That's all modular that can be plugged into different exercises. That you can also look at our website at workethic.org. There's also just some resources there if you want to do it. But I would say this more than anything else. Small, again, that 1% approach, right? This small incremental improvements, these small little bites, and talk about how it contextualizes in with what you do. One of the things that I think is always interesting is, how do you relate work ethic to the classroom work that you're doing? How does it kind of fit in together? When we talk about ambition, how does that tie into the lesson that you're learning in civics or whatever else it is that you're kind of developing with the population you serve. The more you can integrate those things, the better off you're going to be.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much. I just have a quick poll I have to share with everyone. If you're on still, you can, Josh, you don't have to do this if you, if you don't want to go. So I'm gonna have people just answer this really quick question. Let us know how the professional development webinar met your expectations today. And I'm seeing all great and good answers, so that's good. So thank you.
It won't
again.
let me vote for some reason, Liz. I don't know why.
Well, maybe it's because you're the panelist. You're one of the panelists. This is probably one of the best ones that I've attended. So it was really, really good. So interesting.
And to everybody out there, thank you again for attending this webinar. But most importantly, thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, I know nobody gets into adult education because you want to make a ton of money or become famous, right? You're here doing this work because you want to make a difference in people's lives, and that is so powerful. As we head into this end of the year kind of season of reflection and giving, thank you all for what you do, and let's all work together and make 2020 just an absolutely fantastic year.
Yes, thank you so much. And we want to just thank Burlington English again for their sponsorship. And Robert had to catch a flight, but he wanted me to make sure to tell everyone happy holidays. So thank you. We'll see you next time.